Relief Bartender is the 23rd episode of the 4th season of Cheers. This is directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows, and there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and talk about various things. I have a relatively high amount of notes here, so this might take a bit of time, but it's definitely a really moving episode, actually. There are some really emotional scenes and definitely some funny moments, some great dialogue. There are specific quotes that I want to share with you. And as I said, there will be spoilers from now. It starts off quite delightfully with Cliff having problems with his car. Norm recommends a mechanic. Woody asks if the mechanic could also fix his toaster. And the conversation went exactly as I would have expected with Woody, because Norm tries to explain to Woody that the mechanic can only fix things that originally came with the car. Woody points out that it did come with the car, and it's a delightful way to start things off. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. Then things get a little bit awkward for a moment, but we have a brilliant quote because Sam comes in with a date. Now, bearing in mind in the last episode, we left things off with Sam and Diane seeming like they were about to restart their relationship. So why is Sam coming in with a date? And Diane says, and I wrote this down word for word because it's just so beautifully Diane, and she said, "Last week we were at Passion's portal, standing on the threshold of a new and excitingly textured relationship." I absolutely love it. And Sam responded, "I didn't write this down, so it's not word for word, but he basically said he knocked and nobody was home, so he went next door, and that's the date." So I don't necessarily agree that Sam should be dating other people while they're on the precipice of a relationship, but at the same time, if Diane is not actually allowing them to move forward, she can't really get annoyed at Sam for wanting to date other people. We then get the main narrative kicking in, and Sam says he wants to see all of his employees in his office immediately, and eventually, after he agrees to give them $1, they all go into his office, including Norm, which I thought was adorable, because as we know, Norm did some accounting work for him, and it's very, very sweet that Norm is part of them, even though he's not employed by Sam. Let's face it, he might as well be. And Sam reveals that he's going to become a manager/host. Because he needs to get more attention with Cheers, things need to go better for him, and then we cut to a week later, and I think the passage of time there is really brilliant. We didn't have to deal with the whole planning phase, we just cut to the aftermath of what has happened after Sam has decided to take this next step. We get a bartender called Ken, played by Tony Carreiro, and Ken is a likeable character. We don't get to know him too much, but he seems pretty decent. Unfortunately, things are not going according to plan. So much so that Diane seems to have forgotten the ability to speak with grammatical accuracy, because she tells Sam that she hasn't seen any more customers since this change has happened. In fact, and in her words, there are less. No, Diane, there are fewer customers, not less customers, fewer. It's unusual for Diane to say something that's grammatically incorrect. So when it happens, it really stands out. Am I more amused or irritated? I don't know. I'm not sure, but I thought it was worth mentioning because it doesn't happen that often, but that's how chaotic things have been. The bulk of the rest of the episode takes place in Sam's office, and we have a discussion between Sam and Diane. And Sam says, and I quote, "You don't have my brain." And there are a few seconds before Diane responds, and there's definitely a pause where I believe we, the viewer, are given the chance to try and think of what Diane could possibly say in response. And I think there are many things she could have said, but her response was golden, and she said, "Whoever has it should return it." I absolutely adore it. I like the fact that her response wasn't immediate. I don't know if it was intentional, but I feel like just giving us, as a viewer, those few seconds, knowing that Diane is going to say something, but with the anticipation of wondering what that's going to be. I loved it. Absolutely adored it. And they decide that the only thing they can do is restore things to the way they were, but that would mean firing Ken. Because Sam thought that this new venture would bring in more customers, bring in more money, so obviously it hasn't done that. They haven't got extra money. Sam needs to go back behind the bar. They can't afford to keep Ken on. And at the perfect moment, Ken comes in with his family and his 2 children. The children are absolutely adorable. And Sam realizes he can't fire Ken. So they decide, they being Sam and Diane, that the only thing they can do is try and persuade Woody to leave. Now, I don't like this, not just because I wouldn't want Woody to leave, but I just don't think that that's fair. You can't hire somebody who's been there for a week and then fire somebody who has given you so much loyalty for such a, I don't know how long it's been since the beginning of season 3, but such a long amount of time nevertheless, and let one person go because the other person has a family. That's not acceptable. That's not the way to treat somebody, and I think it's pretty despicable. I also don't necessarily think Diane would have agreed that that was the right way to go. I don't think she would have seen that as fair or acceptable, but one could argue that she looks at the children and thinks that anybody with children should take priority in terms of employment, and it's not necessarily an unfair argument, but it's a disgusting situation to be in, and I don't think that it was going about things the right way. And nevertheless, Sam doesn't think that that's a problem, and he tries to encourage Woody to leave. And honestly, it is heartbreaking when the penny drops and Woody says, "You're firing me." It's genuinely emotional. Now, I know what happens in future episodes, and of course I know what happened at the end of this episode, but in that moment, it is devastating. It is crushing. And it's just horrible to think that Sam thought that that was an okay thing to do. Thankfully, it turns out that Ken is leaving, and Woody is actually brilliant in the last few minutes in this. He's very, very clever. He tells Sam that he's not just going to come back now that Ken's decided to leave. Good on Woody. Good on him for thinking that. He's not somebody who can just be dropped and rehired at somebody else's convenience. But he does agree to come back for $100 a month raise. And Sam tries to trick him into saying that $50 is the agreed upon raise, and Woody says no, it was 100. And I think Woody knew what he was doing when he said $100 a month is too steep, I'll settle for $30 a week. I'm pretty confident he knew what he was doing in that moment, because $30 a week is obviously more than $100 a month. And over the kind of 5 minutes towards the end of this episode, we get to see this different side to Woody. It's a side where he stands up for himself, and a side where he actually proves that actually he is quite clever, such as tricking Sam into giving him a $30 a week raise because he worked out that it was more money. And it's a great way to show that, yes, he often comes across as a bit of an idiot. And this is bookmarked, of course, because at the beginning of the episode, we do get that side of Woody. And then at the very end, we see the other side to him. And it shows that actually he's a very well-rounded, well-written, realistic character who is often not necessarily in tune to what's going on around him, but also there is this other side to him. And I rather enjoyed it, and I thought it was a beautiful, beautiful moment for Woody at the end there. And it's a great episode. I think my favourite moment absolutely was when Diane said about Sam's brain, whoever has it should return it. But the whole thing is just beautifully written, really well done, really thoroughly enjoyed it, and needless to say, Relief Bartender is one that I'll always enjoy. Things do get interesting going forward. We are hurtling towards the end of the 4th season, which is bittersweet because I know there are great episodes to come, but also it means we are one episode closer to being finished. But also means one episode closer to me going back to the beginning and starting all over again. But for now, Relief Bartender is an absolute joy, and I'm sure it's an episode I will always enjoy.